We're good to go. That's it. We're rolling.
Okay, well, I've often been asked over the years how I got into the bikes. Well, when I was in high school, all I wanted was a 125cc Italian motorbike that made all the noise I could wake the neighbours up. But on a school holiday with my high school guys, we went to France, to the south of France. And on the coach trip to the south of France, we bumped into a bike race. It wasn't the tour, but it was quite big because there were hundreds of people. And all these pretty girls in bikinis. And I thought, this is the sport for me. So instead of buying a motorbike, I bought a road bike. And when I started work a few months later, a lot of the guys at work were apprentices like me. And because apprentices' wages were so poor, the only way to get to work was on a bike. And one of the guys I worked with raced. And he said, why don't you race? You're doing all this training, you're riding to work and back. You might as well race and see how you go. Well, I joined the club for 1 year and then got rather pleasantly headhunted by a bigger club the following year in 1962. Called the Old Port Leon Cycling Club that had the 25-mile champion called Dave Bonner riding for them. And from then it just took off. I raced until I emigrated to the United States in 1966 and I ended up in Australia in 1973. Started racing again with the Northern Suburbs Club and then got into the bicycle business itself and in wholesaling. And then I've been in and out the bike, well, not in and out the bike business, but in the bike business since 1974 one way or another. And I've been given the opportunity by bicycle editors over the years, and I've been able to have free rein of writing about what I love, which is the history of bike racing.
Well, there's a quick overview. I was going to say I'm talking with Ray English, but he's started the conversation without any introduction. But we've known each other for probably 20 years now, and you drop into the ride office once in a while and recount a little bit of history, and we like to reflect on races, and that's basically what is the genesis of our relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, so I saw my first Tour of France in 1961 when Jacques Anquetil won the race. And to give you an idea how different it is then to now, the last stage of the tour, Anquetil was well in the lead in the yellow jersey, but the stage was from Tours to Paris, a reverse of the Paris Tours Classic basically. And I rode on my bike from London and then got to the last climb in Paris, which is the climb of Petit Clermont, just a few kilometres outside of Paris to the south. Waited there like with all the spectators, and then the helicopter came along and told us that they were just down the road. It was all very exciting. And then Anquetil came along in the breakaway. There was 7 of them in the break, and Anquetil rode the last 5 kilometres at the front into the Parc of France to lead out his teammate Robert Cazola, and Cazola won the stage. And there was an example of Anquetil didn't just sit on his haunches and finish with the bunch. He was determined to see the yellow jersey into Paris, and then keep riding hard and lead out the sprint. And that sort of thing doesn't seem to happen these days. It's kind of clinical. And I had a lovely experience in 1965. I was at the Tour of France finish at Roubaix in the Velodrome. And just because I spoke English and had a camera, in those days there weren't too many English-speaking journalists, so I just walked into the track centre and no one stopped me. And I stayed there all day, and Peter Chisman, the English rider from Great Britain team, won the stage. And they couldn't find anybody who spoke French and English, except me. So I had my 15 minutes of fame in the middle of the Velodrome at Roubaix, interviewing Peter Chisman in English and then translating into French for the French broadcasters. It provides a continuum of from when I first rode the bike, and as I said, I like history and I like finding little quirky things about bike riders and things like this. So one of the things I currently think about is, in a Tour of France peloton of 200 riders, could you get a small orchestra amongst them? Are there any violin players, secret violin players, or secret oboe players that could form a little sort of Vivaldi's Four Seasons quartet amongst all of them? But I've yet to work that one out to see if I'm going to sort of research that, but probably not. But they're the sort of things my mind sort of thinks about.
You sent me a little poem the other day. I can't recall it, but you probably know it off the top of your head. Is that right?
Yes, it was just about being in Flanders in April and how good it is. Everybody should go to Flanders in April and see the bike riding there.
And how did the poem go?
I've forgotten. I'll be quite honest. I didn't bring the. I know I wrote it in about 5 minutes.
You know, you've passionately followed the careers of many.
Mm-hmm.
Who would you classify as your favourite bike rider?
Rick Van Looy.
And why?
He was an animal. No, Rick Van Looy was just a hard bike rider. Whenever in Belgian World Road Champion twice in 1960 and 1961, winner of all the classics, in a time when Belgium really had some good bike riders. And it's a generational thing as well. If I was Australian of my age, with rugby league in Sydney, my heroes would be St George Club with Billy Smith and Graham Langland and those sorts of players. And it's so those sorts of people would still look upon those as the golden days of rugby league. I look upon the golden days of cycling as the 50s and 60s because I was there. And that was Rick Van Looy from shall we say, a classics man, but I like Charlie Gall as a tour rider. And I think he was wonderful when he used to ride in the snow when nobody else would keep going. And they have to sort of thaw him out by pouring hot tea in his gloves.
You tell some good anecdotes, and you've been a key witness to what's gone on in the cycling world over the last 50 years. What do you make of the scene in 2018 versus when you first started?
Well, this may sound a silly thing to say, but it's more clinical, it's easier on the riders. For example, going back 50 or 60 years, Liège-Bastogne-Liège was on the Saturday and the riders fronted up for the Flèche Wallonne on the Sunday.
Or the other way around, maybe?
No, that way round. The Liège-Bastogne-Liège was on the Saturday and then they fronted up, Flèche was on the Sunday. Also, Milan-San Remo, which we've just had and won rather well by Nibali. That was the day after Paris-Nice finished. By the time they got over the ceremonies of Paris-Nice, all the riders riding Milan-San Remo had to jump into a car and drive from the south of France to Milan for the start of Milan-San Remo the next day. So, and then there's races like Bordeaux-Paris, which are no longer on the calendar, which is a Burney-paced race, well, for the last 250k. And that's like 12, 13 hours in the saddle. And it's just, but then again, this day and age, we've got road furniture to contend with, which I never had in those days. And I don't like, I know it's a safety point of view, but I don't like radios. I think it should be done on initiative and chance and this sort of thing. Like you see a Tour of France flat stage now. They let a break up the road and they work it out, they calculate out how long it's going to be to catch them. Occasionally they don't catch them, but I find that rather sad. Whereas in the old days you find the guy in the yellow jersey will be attacking in a flat stage just to try and gain some more time. And I use the word clinical is better any word I can describe it. It's just maybe too scientific, like power meters. Once again, I'm old school. You go out there and you ride at as much power as you can for as long as you can until you blow up. Basically is how I look at it. And but there's a whole generation, of riders now who don't know anything other than power meters and GPSs and things like that. In fact, when I go out on my old road bike, I get some strange looks from people. When you say, "What on earth is that you've got?" What are those two things sticking at the top of your seat tube or your down tube? They're called gear levers. It's a generational thing. It's like I go back to rugby league. You know, it's what you were used to, what you were brought up with, what you were born when you started doing something. It's what was currently popular. There are probably people who were 70 years of age in 1960 who looked upon modern cycling and thinking, the Tour of France is only 4,000k now. When I was a kid, the Tour of France was 4,500k and 26 stages. That sort of thing. So once again, it's all what you've been brought up with.
But cycling served you well. We see you shaking when you're doing your hand gestures, and just an obvious explanation for that is you've had Parkinson's for.
I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 9 years ago, But I do feel that riding a bike is very good for balance, for my general joie de vivre. And when I have no trouble riding a bike, it's when I get off and try and walk sometimes. When I put the bike away, I have trouble. But it's becoming quite a well-known fact in the Parkinson's world that bike riding is very good for balance and the general sort of well-being. There's no cure for it, but you just try and stall it as long as you can. You can just work through it and don't let it beat you down.
So you just talk me through how you use the bike as a little bit of therapy. You'll get out, you ride daily, weekly? It
all depends on the mood, but I try and get out every second day. I live very close, I live in the northwest suburbs of Sydney, and there's a bike path next to a creek, which is very good. It's only about 9 kilometres long, but I can do loops, and I'm out of the traffic. And it's sheltered, it's a nice wide bike path, it's quite testing, it'd be a good cyclocross course. Because obviously, like the people who designed it weren't bike riders. You've been going down a flat, straight bit, and all of a sudden you get a 25% zigzag climb, which catches you out. So, and like I was feeling particularly good last Saturday. I stayed out for 4 hours. Not very fast, but it was just, once again, good therapy. The wife sent out the search parties, wondered where the hell I was.
They found you eventually.
They found me eventually, yes. Couldn't hide any longer.
And talk to me about, you just pulled up a reference to cyclocross. I know that's sort of one of your secret passions as well. You followed it when there were bike races in the centre of Paris designed around stairwells and the like.
Well, yes, one of the most popular cyclocrosses many years ago was done run around Montmartre, up at the Sacred Sœur Church, where there's steps that go up to the church. Hundreds of them, and they would run the cyclocross. Make them run up the steps to the top of Sacred Sœur Montmartre, and then zigzag down the hill, then turn around and run up again. But cyclocrosses come in all shapes and forms. There was one a few years ago, well, more than a few years ago now, where it was based on a 6-day race. Well, not based on 6 days, but they had it in a covered velodrome and ran it outside, and then brought it into the velodrome halfway around the track. Got them off the bike, running up the stairs and then around the walkway at the top, then down the stairs and outside again and round the velodrome. And I thought that was they should do at the Olympic Games next time. Have a cyclocross at the Winter Olympics, because you have the big enough stadium now. You could run outside. You could have a bit of the road, and you could bring them inside. Put some straw bales up on the ice rink. And some matting, and I think that'd be wonderful. That'll make Wout van Aert think a bit, or Matthias van der Poel think a bit. But yeah, I like cyclocross. It's effort for, if you really want to work at it. It's an hour of intense effort. In the old days, again, some of the good road riders, when the salaries of the top riders weren't that great, you still had to eke out a living in some way you would ride cyclocrosses, Anquetil road cyclocrosses, Stablinski road cyclocrosses, for a bit of fitness, but they would get start money, because they're just in the days when there weren't mega buck contracts. It's the same with track racing, 6-day racing. Back when I started being interested, the 6-day races would have a good roadman teamed with a good trackman, and like Simpson would ride with Peter Post. Well, Post was a pretty good bike rider, because he held the record for Paris-Roubaix in 1962. So that's another aspect. 6-day races now, I look at the start sheet of a 6-day race, and there's nobody I know. They're all specialists, and there's no one called Theo Frankenstein riding anymore, who won the 6-day of Stuttgart in 1926, teamed with Pete Van Damen. And his name was Theo Frankenstein, I kid you not, you can check the records. But this to me is going to see a 6-day race in the 60s. You get Van Steenbergen riding, Van Looy riding, accomplished roadies teamed up with a trackie, and to make some extra money, but that was always exciting. Now, going to a 6-day race, you see, nobody.
What are you most nostalgic for these days? I mean, we've talked about some of your fond recollections and different forms of cycling that you like, but if you had it your way, how would you make cycle sport succeed in 2018?
I agree with the commentators that there's too much cycling. It's overkill, and I think there's just too much of it, and too much of it. You don't kill something with malnutrition; you kill it with obesity. So there's got to be some sort of trimming and pruning. Everybody now with air travel, we've got the tour down under, which you couldn't have done that 50 years ago. They'd all been coming out on a boat, and they'd all be unfit by the time they got here, unless they were on rollers. If you've ever ridden rollers on a rolling boat, you've got real skill. Stopping at Cape Town and doing a training ride in Cape Town for an hour, and getting back on the boat and ending up in Australia. When by the time you got to Australia, you'd be so totally unfit, the average C grader could beat you.
I just wonder if you could give a couple of words about what people ought to do if they find themselves with a condition that they wish they didn't have, and how they manage it. You know,
well, you've got with a condition, whether it's Parkinson's or any other debilitating condition, you've got to treat it as something that you have, and you've got to live as well as you can to give your immune system a chance to hold it back. I always consider I have Parkinson's. I won't die of it. I should die with it. That's the way I look at it. And I try and exercise, eat well, live as close to nature as possible. But like I said to you earlier, Robert, there are all sorts of job opportunities you can do with Parkinson's. You can be a cocktail shaker, maracas in a Cuban band, and when you fly, you don't know whether you've hit turbulence or your medication needs to be taken.
Ray, it's always a pleasure to catch up. Thanks for having a chat.
Thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
That's fun. Well, all I had to do was push play.
Thank you for that.
No, that's good. Thank you.
My pleasure. Pleasure doing business with you.